Hi, I'm Kate from Daily Tarot Girl, and welcome to my deep dive video on the world. So we started with the Fool and we've made our way all the way through the Major Arcana. This is my last video in this Major Arcana series, and today we're going to be diving into the world. So the image that you see on your screen is from the Universal Waite Tarot, and the world is number 21. It's the last Major Arcana card. And the world is all about completion, integration, wholeness, expanded horizons, celebration, voyage, flight, taking off, success. And really the world is really kind of, it's worldly. It's the card of experience. We begin with the Fool, which is the card of naivete and inexperience, and we've ended with the world, with this worldly experience. So it's kind of hard to talk about the world without talking about the Fool. So I'm going to be kind of comparing and contrasting those two cards throughout this video. But before I do that, I want to dive into some of the key symbols that you will notice on this card. So the first symbol is nudity. So there is a nude woman on this card, and nudity symbolizes, it can symbolize a few different things, but in this case I think it symbolizes innocence and freedom and being comfortable in one's own skin. And it's interesting that I think that we have nudity, the symbol of innocence, which also shows up in the sun and the star, and which is two other celestial cards in the Major Arcana. And here we have it again in the world. Even though the world is all about being experienced and kind of coming full circle and being at the end of the journey, there is this air of freedom and joy and innocence with it as well. So the next symbol I want to talk about is the purple ribbon that is wrapped around the woman's body. That color purple is really significant. Purple is a color that represents divinity. Often royalty would wear purple, so it represents kind of having arrived, being high status, and connected to the divine. Now, the Fool, which is the first card in the Major Arcana, the beginning of the Fool's journey, that is numbered 0. And when I talked about the Fool, I talked about that 0 being like a portal that you step through as you start your journey. And here with the world, we see that 0 repeated again in the symbol of the green wreath. And that I see that as a 0. I see it as being a connection to the Fool card. I also see it as representing kind of a portal that you're stepping through. I think it also represents coming full circle. It can also represent like a cosmic egg and this theme of emergence, emerging from something. You'll notice that in the 4 corners of this card, there's 4 figures. So there's a human head, there's a eagle head, a bull's head, and a lion. Each of those heads represent one of the 4 elements. So all 4 elements are represented on this card. And that just shows that the world is all about wholeness and integration. You know, everyone's here. all four directions and elements are represented here. The red ribbon that's on the wreath, so if you look at the top and the bottom of the wreath, there's a red ribbon, and if you look at the shape of that red ribbon, it's in kind of like an infinity loop shape, which I think is really interesting. And also I want you to notice the posture of the woman on this card. So her feet are kind of sort of like dancing, and her arms are open, very similar to the Fool. Actually, the Fool, I believe, also has kind of dancing feet a little bit, and his posture is open as well. So there's the same kind of like zesty pep in their step kind of vibe with both of those cards. And that openness, which was with the Fool, is here again with the world. And I think that that's really amazing because the Fool has been through a lot. You know, the beginning, we start with the Fool. The Fool is young, fresh, naive, optimistic, hopeful, trusting, and he goes out into the world. And he goes out into the world really kind of naive. And I think, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but he goes out into the world in search of adventure and seeking, and he's trying to understand and have experiences. And each card in the major arcana is like a different chapter in that journey. It's a different phase or challenge that he's presented with. And he really gets the crap kicked out of him. You know, it starts out kind of nice. We've got the High Priestess, we've got the Empress, the Emperor, so the Magician. It's all about kind of like discovering your own power. And then we get into the more difficult cards like the Hanged Man and the Tower, Death, the Devil, all those like really challenging cards. And then we have some more wonderful cards like the Star and even Temperance and the Sun. And then we come out on the other side. We come full circle with the World. And it's amazing that the World isn't jaded and bitter. The World has regained that sense of inspiration and innocence that the Fool had, and still has that kind of dancing and open posture. So normally I talk about the light side and the light side and the dark side of a tarot card. But with the world is very different from all the other cards in the major arcana in that I don't really see the World as having a dark side. So if you think of the other major arcana cards, you can think of them as like a flat disc, like a coin, and there's two sides to the same coin. So when I was talking about the Sun, I said, you know, the bright side of the Sun is that it's this like wonderful, like extroverted, positive energy. But the downside might be that you put a lot of pressure on yourself to be like that all the time. Whereas when we get to the World, I want you to think of the World as a sphere. Like just think of it as a planet, you know, a world. And so the World is about wholeness and integration and integrating all aspects, that both the negative, the positive, and everything in between. So it's not like there's two sides to the World. The World is everything all at once. Okay, let's dive into, I'm going to dive into like four kind of specific key areas that I think the World represents. You might want to have your pen and paper handy because I'm going to be giving you some journaling questions to explore after if that's your thing, if you like journaling. So the first thing I want to dive into is the theme of completion. The World represents completion. It's all about completing some sort of a journey, achieving something, achieving a certain degree of success, and feeling joyful about this, feeling like you want to celebrate. Now, the Fool kind of goes out into the world young and naive, and he goes through all these different experiences, and when he comes out the other side, he is the World. He's worldly and he's experienced. So there is this completion of that journey with the World. When the Fool goes out, he goes out into the world seeking something, even if it's just adventure and experiences. And he sees himself as apart from the world, so separate from the world. Whereas when we get to the world understands the world. So the world sees how everything is connected. The woman in the world knows that there is a little part of her in everyone and everything, and there's a little part of everyone and everything in her. So she understands that she is a part of this cosmic whole. Whereas the Fool has yet to discover that. The Fool still is under the illusion that he is separate. One thing I want to mention is that the Fool has this open posture. He begins his journey open-hearted, and his optimism and open-heartedness is based on his naiveness and inexperience. He just doesn't know any better. But when we come to the world has regained this open posture, and the world's openness is based on spiritual experience and understanding. So I want you to think of kind of the key difference there. The fool is just young and naive, therefore optimistic and trusting, whereas the world is wise and experienced, has been through the ringer and come out the other end, and has been able to regain that sense of trust and optimism and openness, but it's come from spiritual experience and understanding. So a couple journaling questions I have for you. Where in your life have you come full circle? So going from fool to the world, where in your life have you come full circle? And in what ways are you more worldly than your younger self? Now, I actually, normally when I do these videos, I like to tell little kind of personal stories when I talk about the cards, just to kind of illustrate what the cards are all about. And I had a really hard time with the world connecting it to anything personal in my own life. And I actually wonder if it's because I just haven't experienced that card yet in my life. I'm still relatively young. I'm not at the end of my life, and well, hopefully not. And I have a hard time connecting with the world on a really personal level because it feels like such a momentous kind of spiritual card. And I feel like I don't really have the wisdom and the perspective that the world has yet. I'm still, deep in the fool's journey. So the second area that I want to dive into is this idea of wholeness and integration. So the world is all about wholeness, becoming whole, integrating all parts of ourself and all parts of our experience. So bringing everything that you've learned and discovered and integrating it into the self. So there is this element of self-acceptance here with the world and being at peace with yourself and with what is. You actually need kind of like a higher, almost spiritual perspective in order to do this sometimes. I don't think it's easy to accept all parts of yourself and all parts of your life experience. It really does require kind of a higher spiritual perspective. And if you notice when you look at, I dropped my card. When I look at the card, like she's kind of up in the clouds, she's up in the sky. And so it's like she has this sort of higher perspective. What else do I want to say about that? The other thing to point out here is the four corners. Now I know I've already talked about this, but there's those four corners with the four heads, which represent all four elements in the four directions. Again, this is about integrating all aspects of self, all aspects of your life experience, being able to accept all parts of your life and life experience, and recognizing their value in developing your spirit. Being willing to look at everything in your life and all the different parts of yourself and who you are, and being able to feel very grateful for their presence and value. Even the bad stuff, even the uncomfortable stuff. So some journaling questions here are, what does becoming whole mean to you? What does becoming whole mean to you? And what aspects of self or your life experience do you find difficult to accept and integrate? And are there any parts of yourself that you're working on integrating? These are some big questions, especially the first one. What does becoming whole mean to you? I'm not even sure if I can answer that myself. So these are big kind of lofty sort of spiritual questions to ponder. So the next area I want to dive into with the world is openness and connectedness. So when the world shows up in a reading, she's often there to encourage you to expand your horizons, to think globally and see the connections. As I mentioned before, the world knows that everything is connected. There's a little bit of her in everyone and everything, and a little bit of everyone and everything in her. the world encourages us to really think big and know that you have an impact. Sometimes we're under this illusion that we're small and that what we do doesn't really make a difference. The world really challenges you to change that thinking and to recognize yourself as actually being, you matter, you are powerful, and you can have an impact. So once again, the Fool's openness comes from youth and naiveness, but the world's openness comes from fearlessness that worldly experience and spiritual development bring. Okay, just bear with me a sec. I'm just gonna switch out my note sheet here. So I have a couple of journaling questions for you. The first one is, if you weren't limited by time, space, or money, what would you do? So this is kind of an interesting question to consider, because I think that we often are under the impression that we're very much limited by time and space. And that's part of the human experience, being limited by those things. But if you weren't limited by those things, what might you do? And this is a great way to just kind of think outside the box and get your creative juices flowing and get some ideas. Second question is, in what ways are you staying small? How would you like to expand? And what stops you from being more open? Now, the fourth area that I want to dive into is voyage, flight, and taking off. So because the world represents kind of like completion, the end of a cycle, the end of something, it also represents the beginning of something more, something new. So you've kind of graduated from one area and you're ready for the next adventure. And again, that I see that green wreath as kind of being like a portal that the woman of the world is ready to kind of dance right through. So getting ready for the next step, lifting off, taking flight, these are all things that the world can represent when they show up in a reading. So a journaling question I have for you is, what new adventure, journey, or voyage are you ready for right now? So let's talk about the wisdom of the world. Out of all the major arcana cards, the world is perhaps the most wise because she's seen and experienced it all. Yet if you look at her, you'll notice that her expression on her face is like quite relaxed. She looks youthful. She appears fresh and innocent, maybe even more so than the Fool. And she's dancing, she's kind of smiling, she has that relaxed expression. So she isn't like haggard and jaded like you might expect her to be. So she's found a way to use her experiences, her struggles, her trials and tribulations, her joys, her successes, in order to grow and expand and gain a certain understanding, a certain higher perspective. And no matter where you are right now, you are on a path that will eventually lead to the world. All right, so that's it. That's the world done. So I want to hear from you. Can you relate to this card? Is this a card that you really resonate with? And what aspect do you resonate with? What part of the world surprises you? Did you learn anything new while watching this video? So if you're interested in learning more from me, you can check out my website, dailytarotgirl.com. I have all the major arcana cards on my website and this channel. I'll put all the links below where you can get all the videos for all the majors. And some of you have asked me if I'm going to do the minors next. And I don't think I'm going to do the minors, but I am going to do the court cards. So starting really soon, I'm going to start a new series, which is looking at the court cards in the same kind of manner that I dove into the major arcana cards. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope you enjoy that as well. So thank you so much for watching.